Hey, it's Thursday, Section 1904. Welcome in. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being supportive of Section 1904. We are going to be off for 4th of July, so this is possibly, we have a couple of ideas to kick around, possibly going to be our final podcast of the week. So go back. You can listen to Sean Kelly, who was reviewing F1, the movie. If you missed that yesterday while the Padres were splitting a doubleheader against the Philadelphia Phillies, that's available to you. John, good job earlier today. I did like the front row seat, got me caught up very, very quickly. Part of what you get when you subscribe to Section 1904, it is as little as $5 per month for you to enjoy at least 5 podcasts per week. Normally, the front row seat, all the goodies, access to the Discord channel. Today we have another independent journalist, independent content creator, member of the media, Jon Arnold, who's going to join us. Jon Arnold, who I have followed for many, many years, but I don't think ever officially chatted with in any capacity, meaning interview-wise or conversation-wise, which is more to better describe how it is that we operate here on Section 1904, is going to talk to us about USA versus Mexico on Sunday, Gold Cup final, the United States men's national team taking on El Tri, the Mexican national team, Sunday at 3 o'clock, so just part of the 4th of July weekend festivities. Looking forward to that. We have the Padres returning home, SDFC returning home to take on the Houston Dynamo. So all sorts of stuff happening here. John, how's your Thursday going? Are you preparing for the long weekend?
I am preparing for the long weekend, trying my best to prepare for the long weekend. By that I mean I'm defrosting some meat that I'm going to smoke over the course of the weekend, and I've stocked up on beer, and I have some friends that might be coming into town or coming over from the other side of town to enjoy the beer and the meats and the pool. So hopefully we have good weather this weekend. I haven't even bothered to look, but it's San Diego, so I imagine so. I'm all ready. On the topic of the front row seat, real quick, I know we used to talk about this in radio, but you were more directly attached to it than I was. I started doing the front row seat in March, and it's only now that I'm like, oh man, we're like running out of sports stuff. Like if there was no like USA Mexico Gold Cup coming up in a few days, I would be a little like, what do I put in here? Like the Padres won a game and lost a game in a doubleheader. Like that doesn't seem like big enough to lead a front row seat. So like, it just feels like because, the NBA has stopped, the NBA draft has passed, the NFL draft has passed, the NFL, preseason or training camp hasn't begun yet. It feels like everything's gotten really quiet, except for baseball and soccer, and I guess tennis with Wimbledon right now. But I'm very thankful for soccer these days. It's giving me something sports-wise to both cover in the front row seat and watch on an almost daily experience.
All right, good. And speaking of, Manny Machado becomes the 4th member of SDFC to make an all-star game. So congratulations to Manny Machado. That was good news yesterday. A little bit of good news as the Padres were splitting with the Philadelphia Phillies. So that's 4. He, Anders Dreyer, and Chucky Lozano, and Yape Tverskov, all of them all-stars here. So that's really, really good to see. An all-star starter, Manny Machado. Saw the video clip that was making the rounds of Mike Schilt in full uniform inside of the clubhouse going up to Manny and saying, congratulations. Hey, now you're an all-star. Way to go, Manny Machado. I do love that this guy's wearing full uniform in the clubhouse between games. Good for you, Mike Schilt. Never change.
I do find it funny that Manny Machado is starting third baseman on the All-Star team, and I know we've been shitting on Tatis, and it's, he had a great first 5 weeks, and he's been nothing since. Like, Fernando Tatis Jr. has 1.2 more WAR than Manny Machado so far this year, and that's amazing, considering Manny's had a pretty good year and is batting significantly better than Tatis over the course of the year. Do you, and this is a long way of leading into my question, who else do you think on the Padres, not as a starter, obviously starter's been named, who else on the Padres do you think has a good chance of going to the All-Star game?
I would think Robert Suarez.
Okay.
He is leading the league in saves, isn't he?
He has an ERA over 4.
Yeah, but that's a relief pitcher. Those things always get skewed because you've had a bad outing or two.
I guess. 24 saves, that probably leads the league. I was thinking like Jason Adam, maybe Morejon, because he's
Jason Adam.
I mean, I know I'm old man statting here, but like, do you really want to bring a guy in and have it on TV that, here's an all-star with his 4.04 ERA, or do you want the guy walking in with the 1 point something ERA halfway through the season where it's like, holy shit, this guy never gives up an earned run? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I also don't know. Is he going to get voted in? This is where it gets a little, it's a little unclear how exactly all the roster spots are filled. Sometimes they get voted in by players. There's a managerial selection. Yeah. If it comes down to Dave Roberts, do you think Dave Roberts is going to pick Robert Suarez, who hit Shohei Ohtani with a 100-mile-per-hour fastball? I don't know. I mean, I'd be kind of curious to know if that is a decision that Dave might have to make. I'd love to know if that gets factored in, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's exactly going to work because, again, he might get voted in. I think the players I don't have the time or interest to look this up, so if you want to do it, John, you can do it. I just know the roster's filled out by players' votes. And I think, do the coaches vote? Coaches vote for something. Do they vote for Gold Glove or something? I'm not sure. But
I don't
there's just a lot of people voting for things in baseball.
That's true. You just brought up a good point, though, that I forgot about. Manny Machado going to be managed by Dave Roberts, two guys that have had some issues with each other in the past. Do you think that they make good, make nice, put all that behind them? Do they ignore each other? Was it all eyewash to begin with? How do you think that relationship goes?
You're still talking about this? That was remember Manny's response to Marty?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I guess, I think there's probably been more than one situation in life where Manny Machado might have walked into a clubhouse for an all-star game or some other situation where he wondered across the room, is that guy okay with me, or how's that going to work? So I'm going to guess everybody will be on their best behavior for the MLB All-Star game. Padres did split. Can I just laugh real quick at something that was in Kevin Acey's newsletter today? So the Padres had about 1 million walks in the first game of this. I think the first 3 runs walked in or something like that.
Wait. Actually, from the same newsletter, I was going to read the part where he said he was talking about them scoring a bunch of runs in the first game, and he goes, let's not get carried away. The Padres walked 9 times, including 3 times with the bases loaded. They got 5 hits, and they didn't score after the 4th inning.
Right, but he goes on then to actually put some significance on the walks. Because he says in the first game, the Padres put into practice partially something they've been talking about a lot. There was no downplaying how important Mike Schilt felt it was for the Padres hitters to let the game come to them. If we do that, the team is going to be virtually unstoppable. Schilt said that emphatically between games. It really is. We're very stingy. We weren't going to give them anything that wasn't on the plate. Amazing job. If we're stingy like that, there's no absolute in this game. But if you do that with the talent we have in the zone, then we're going to be a dangerous team. We've done it. Listen, the game can be challenging when guys are painting both sides of the plate and they're a little bit off of it. Hitters can tend to expand, but we got back to being stubborn today. To this, I say, John, what? Because did I not read in this same space recently that the problem with Juan Soto is that he would never expand the zone and he was a terrible teammate because he wouldn't expand the zone even by a couple of inches. And therefore, that made him a player who much more was inclined to want to walk than he was inclined to hit. Did I not read that in the same space not too long ago? Or am I fucking imagining that?
You are not imagining that. That was in fact there. And it does feel like, and I've been watching this with Tatis. Like, they started off the year and it was like, man, Tatis is just crushing it. And lately, where Tatis has had struggled to hit for power, he's taking more walks as a way to try and get on base. And it's like, okay, cool, that's a fine plan B. But for Mike Schilt to come out and be like, this is actually our plan A. It's never about, we don't care if we're last in home runs, as long as we're getting on base. Moneyball, baby. Like, it's very weird.
Kevin writes, shrinking the zone, waiting for their pitch, and doing damage has been the focus of so much of their internal discussions recently.
Ugh.
Recently.
Not
many hits, Manny Machado said, but we had really good at-bats overall. As a group, it was tough outs. Next up is letting this translate into actually doing damage. I mean, this is almost to the letter exactly what it was that Juan Soto had as an approach as a big league hitter. This is exactly it. And this is the thing that these guys all whispered about. These are the things that even if you read between the lines, Jackson Merrill's like, I'm not here to be a walker. I'm here to be a hitter. These are all the things that these guys went out of their way to say, nah, that's not the kind of team that we want to be. Not that guy out there. He'll never expand the zone. And now all of a sudden we're sitting here talking about it in a completely different form and with completely different emphasis than we used to. I don't, why do I bother with this stuff?
It's also the complete and total opposite of everything that they've told us about Luis Arias for a year, where they're like, hey, look, he swings at everything, but he makes contact. And we are a team that's all about making consistent contact. If you make contact 3-4 times in an inning, like, you got a real good chance of bringing around a run. And he's hitting the pitches that he wants to hit, that he knows he can hit. It doesn't matter if they're in the strike zone. Now it matters a big deal that they're in the strike zone and that he does damage. Which if I was Luis Arias, I'm like, if that's the message they're giving out, like, don't swing at pitches outside the zone, and when they're in the zone, make sure you do damage with them, I'd be like, well, shit, I'm going to get traded immediately. I don't fit into what they want as a first baseman, obviously.
Right. I mean, come on, man. Maybe this is the problem with the team, is that they are literally, and I don't know, I don't think it's the reporting. I mean, the reporting has suggested two completely polar opposite things.
Yeah.
But maybe this is the problem internally, that they went from doing one thing to trying to do another thing, and now they're just really not doing much of anything. I don't know. They had 2 extra base hits, so they weren't doing any damage. 2 extra base hits in the entire series in Philadelphia.
Good God.
Is, not easy to do. But they come back home and the Texas Rangers, so we'll see what happens. Darvish may or may not pitch. We'll spend time on that later. All right, it's going to be a Gold Cup final, USA and Mexico. Jon Arnold is a soccer reporter who for many years has been with ESPN, who has been with The Athletic, who's been for MLS.com or MLSsoccer.com. So, he's got bylines at major publications. Like us, Jon is independent. He has a great Substack. He has a newsletter that we would recommend people subscribing to. As a matter of fact, I have multiple newsletters that show up in my inbox every single day. Not only Front Row Seat, but Getting CONCACAFed. Jon primarily covers CONCACAF, which is the confederation that the U.S. and Mexico plays in. This is for North and Central America. So the governing body of U.S. soccer and Canadian soccer and Mexican soccer. It's a good one coming up on Sunday. It's another edition of USA and Mexico. This will be the, what is it? What did I have this? The
8th?
Like 8th time that they're meeting?
I think I heard 8th. And actually, while we're here, I thought
8th time.
Landon Donovan did a pretty good job on the call last night. There were a couple moments where he was real good. I loved at the end when it was pretty obvious. I actually thought he was a little early on, but it was pretty obvious that Mexico was going to win that game against Honduras, and it was going to be U.S. versus Mexico in the Gold Cup final. And Landon just lays out for like a minute and just goes on about, hey, you got plans on Sunday, 4:00 Pacific. Get your ass on the couch, get some snacks, get a beverage. You're going to want to be sitting down. It's going to be a great match. Like, he sold it really, really well. I was already excited. Him showing me how excited he was got me even more excited. And I'm it's going to be a fun match. USA,
of course,
Mexico.
Landon's excited. I mean, it's his 2 favorite teams. So
that's true.
Of course, guy can't lose. He can't lose on Sunday, no matter what. Landon's the big winner. Love you, Landon. All right, so let's say hello about this rivalry, about not only the soccer rivalry, but everything. I'm sorry. I mean, there's just more to it. USA versus Mexico means more than just what it is that's happening on the field. So Jon Arnold, who's terrific at covering the sport, he will join us here on Section 1904.
And he shot on goal, saved by Navarro. Luna follows up. 1-0 USA.
All right, so here is Jon Arnold, and he actually started covering the Gold Cup right here in San Diego. That's right. He was one of the people that was at that Haiti-Saudi Arabia match back on June 15th. Jon, welcome to Section 1904. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, my pleasure. Yeah, you could have counted us for sure, and I think they did count me twice because I was at both games of the doubleheader. That's a tough one, Great city, San Diego. I lived very near there for many years. Actually, that's not quite true, for a year and change, but man, it's a tough one when it's Haiti, Saudi Arabia, and Suriname, Costa Rica. I wouldn't call those the big draws of CONCACAF, but pleasure to be here, guys, and talk about what's happened in the tournament since those amazing days.
Well, I do want to make a bigger point about the Gold Cup that is related to Haiti and Saudi Arabia and some of the matches that were played here at Snapdragon Stadium. But I have to say, just before we get started, because I don't want to forget about it later, which I will, that, I'm a subscriber to your newsletter, which people can find on Substack. And we'll give out all the information for people to be a subscriber to what it is that John's doing. And he's been doing really, really good work. And we are attracted to independent content creators now that's what John G and I are doing here. But every time, John, that I log on to your Substack in particular, I see Grant Wall. It shows you any mutual subscribers. And I see the name Grant Wall, who passed away at the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. And it reminds me every time, respectfully, for all the journalists who are doing great work, how much I would love to know what Grant Wall just thinks of, all of this stuff that's happening here. I know you had some relationship with him. And I wonder who it is that's going to step in and someday be that voice that so many of us turn to.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, first of all, God rest Grant's soul, and it's something that, I still have the same thought as well. You see some of the stuff that's happening with the Saudi sponsorship of the Gold Cup and Saudi Arabia participating. He was such a good voice on some of those things, but fair. And I think it's easy to get into screeds, and it's easy to get into the opposite, just kind of accepting. And I don't think he did that. And I think that's part of the reason his work spoke so heavily. And the women's team coverage was so good as well, and how he balanced both of those things, the U.S. men's national team, the U.S. women's national team. I think his voice has been really missed. And he was part of the reason he was such a unique voice is because he had this kind of cross. I certainly, with my newsletter, as much as I maybe feel like I don't deserve to be in the box, I feel like I'm in a soccer box. And Grant crossed out of that, right? He was the only one that I think, when we talk about journalists, he was mainstream because of the platform afforded to him by Sports Illustrated, because of the way he was able to sort of tell those stories that had the nuggets for us soccer sickos, but also welcomed people who maybe didn't know the game as well into the fold, finding the most interesting things to them. I definitely think we're missing that, and I almost think it's irreplaceable in this media landscape, right? Yes, Grant went independent after leaving Sports Illustrated, but he already had that massive platform from this magazine that, I grew up reading since I was 6 and always wanted to be the next S.L. Price or Gary Smith or Grant Wall. And now, as I look at my career, and I mean, you guys, congrats on going independent as well. Maybe some of your heroes, I don't know who they are, but if you're oh, I want to be the next Jim Rome. No, there's never going to be another Jim Rome, and I don't think there's ever going to be another Grant Wall. But I do think that myself and a few others are trying to kind of fill that void of important soccer coverage that appeals to more than just soccer nerds. Although we also are quite nerdy, so...
Yes. In fact, if you're going to Tahiti, Saudi Arabia Gold Cup, I think that you get to wear the nerd crowd. Yeah, for sure about that one. And I would just recommend, because I'm sure we'll spend some time talking about the Gold Cup final, the United States men's national team playing against Mexico in Houston. And one of Grant's final projects was a 3-part series that I think people can still find on Amazon Prime. I think I have this right, Jon and John. And it was called Good Rivals. And it was all about what it was and how it is that this rivalry between these two countries had gone from where it once had been to where it was at the time of Grant's passing. And he brings in a lot of other elements. He wasn't afraid to bring in the element of what Donald Trump and some of those words had to say, and what they might have meant to the rivalry. I don't know where it is now, but I'm sure you saw that as well, John A. I'll separate the two Johns here. I'm sure you saw that one as well. I'm going to find some time, hopefully, to watch that before the final on Sunday, just to remind myself of some of the great work that Grant was doing, and just to butch up a little bit on what USA and Mexico means in soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the context continues to change when you talk about Trump's kind of first presidency, the candidacy launch. I was living in Mexico at the time that he launched that campaign and won the presidency in 2016. And, I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel often in Latin America, where you see the kind of ramifications of some of these decisions that get made at this high level. And now with, the rhetoric about Canada being the 51st state, obviously that's not a U.S.-Mexico thing, but a North America thing. And you talk about all 3 of these countries hosting the World Cup in 2026. And I think the soccer politicians, Gianni Infantino, Victor Montagliani, who runs CONCACAF, the governing body that we're talking about and making puns about, these people have to sort of find a way to say, of course we're all singing Kumbaya, of course we're all excited to host this thing, of course the rhetoric that's coming from the White House isn't going to affect this fiesta of football, and yet, how can it not? right? I mean, when people are when you are putting people on a list, Haiti was in San Diego, they had to, they can only travel to San Diego because of an exception in this travel ban that Donald Trump has put into place. When you say, oh, the world is welcome, we can't wait to have everyone's fans. Look, like, it is political, and the U.S.-Mexico rivalry is political. Yeah, on Sunday we'll be talking tactics and what happens during the 90 minutes, and how do you get the ball on the foot of Diego Luna? How do you stop Gilberto Mora, this exciting 16-year-old across the border there in San Diego who plays for Xolos? That stuff is fun and good and important, but that context can't be stripped away, and certainly Grant wasn't afraid to go into that. And, the chapters of the U.S.-Mexico rivalry, I think, I don't know that you can directly tell the story of the U.S.-Mexico political relationship just through soccer, but you can get a good window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking forward to it as well. I mean, what journalism off to the side, if you don't mind. I mean, what is your approach to this rivalry? Are you strictly journalistically approaching it from everything that you just described there, or does it carry more meaning for you personally?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm an American who lived in Mexico, who has made much of my career covering Mexico in English for this market of Mexican Americans and Mexicans here in the U.S. who would prefer to consume their news and get their news in English. So, look, I covered the World Cup in 2018. It was my career highlight at the time, and maybe still. And the U.S. didn't qualify for that World Cup. I was there to cover Mexico and help out on some other matches. And what does Mexico mean to me? I mean, we could get into that, but I will tell you that a tear came to my eye when the Mexican national anthem played and I saw Chicharito on the field crying. I wasn't as emotional as he was, but for me, it was the culmination of something that I believe in, which is this regional soccer coverage, that people in the U.S. care about what happens with the Mexico national team, with the Costa Rica national team, with the Salvador national team, Haiti, Suriname, whoever it may be. And, but yeah, I think Mexico is a country that, hopefully, I'm launching a new project here that I need to pull off well before I tell you guys about it. Maybe I'll come back on here in a month or two, but that hopefully helps people understand more about Mexico as a country, because I think it's very easy to have a skewed picture, even with people that have traveled there, even those in San Diego who enjoy crossing the border and maybe getting to the Valle de Guadalupe and enjoying the wine, or to Ensenada and enjoying the seafood, or Puerto Nuevo and enjoying the lobster. These are great things and help you understand more of the culture, as does the soccer. For me personally, it's an incredibly special rivalry. I roll my eyes a little bit at some of the rhetoric that sometimes gets tossed around in the soccer context, and certainly roll my eyes at a lot of the things that happen politically, as I don't think people who read my work will be shocked to learn. But it's an extremely important game. And even I was just thinking about, it's the 4th of July, should I wear I have a U.S. soccer shirt, but I have a Mexico jersey, and I'm always worried that somebody's going to snap a photo and be this biased jerk. And it's no, I have Mexico shirts, I have U.S. shirts, I have Dominican Republic shirts. Those are the federations that have sent me shirts. So if you're listening, Aruba, and you want to send me one, I'll give you my address. Get
on it, Curacao. What are you waiting for?
I'm going to cover you fairly, but if you want to kick a shirt, I might put it on at the barbecue, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't know if that's super. I think it's probably insightful to where I'm at. I don't root for either team. It doesn't bring me extra joy when one or the other wins or anything, but it's absolutely a very special thing. And I mentioned the World Cup was a career highlight, so too was a U.S.-Mexico qualifier in the Azteca. It's COVID affected, so I haven't been able to do one with a full Azteca, and it would have to wait until the next cycle, if it even happens in the next cycle. But these games mean a lot to me personally, both as a professional journalist and just as a person who grew up in the U.S. loving soccer and watching these games since, the 90s.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. I like being a part of these conversations because you and Darren can both get nerdy and lean on the history. I'm still fairly new to soccer fandom, especially international soccer fandom. I followed an EPL squad for a few years now, but that's about it. And I have a lot of friends who are Mexican Americans who root for both of these teams until they play each other, and then they pick a side. And some of them root for Mexico and some of them root for the U.S. And that's fine. I don't hold any of that against them. But as a fairly new person to this, the star of the moment who scored 2 goals last night, kind of the hero of the win that brought the U.S. to the Gold Cup finals, Diego Luna, who, unless I'm mistaken, which it is hard to find information about him on the internet because he shares the same name with a very famous actor. Diego Luna is Mexican-American.
Yeah.
And just an additional point that you can touch on for me personally, he looks unlike any soccer star that I've ever seen. And I don't just mean all the tattoos and the hair. I mean, like, he looks like me. Like, he's short and he's stout, and it doesn't look like he should be an elite athlete, but he is absolutely an elite athlete. So,
and that's biased. That's prejudiced him, right? Like,
yes.
He, during his career, even though he's had this rapid ascent and he's in his early 20s, is a Mexican-American.
Yeah.
Has spoken about that sort of dichotomy that exists where, you like both national teams and you kind of pick a side. He has said he picked the U.S., which is actually somewhat surprising because it seems like most young Mexican Americans pick Mexico. Again, that's kind of the audience that I was able to carve that niche out and serve headed to the World Cup and now with the newsletter.
Maybe Diego's a reader.
Maybe so, man. You know, it is funny, sort of the things you hear. But yeah, I mean, I think Luna is just not only is he a different looking player physically, which I think is true, and I think has caused some coaches to say, well, I don't know about this kid, or we're going to go in a different direction. He also plays the game in a way, in a style that's different than many Americans in the past. You know, he is this player who, while I think he grew up watching these U.S.-Mexico matches and rooting for the U.S., I think he was also watching clips of some of these, Latin American playmakers of old, and has this idea that get the ball to my feet, I'm going to make something happen. Yeah, maybe I'll set you up if I see you, but I also might do this myself. And that's what he did in that game in the semifinal against Guatemala. He did it twice. They needed him to do it twice because Guatemala had an amazing Gold Cup. They really, really rallied once they had that second goal. It seemed like they were able to regroup and push and push. They found another goal, made things interesting at the end. But Luna is this rising star who looks different physically, who plays different stylistically, and I think just is different as a person. You know, he's spoken about taking a part-time job at a coffee shop at Dutch Brothers. You know, and partly, Dutch Brothers, I haven't actually been, but my understanding is they almost ambush you with kindness, where they just kind of chat with you about your day and want to make it so you come back. And he got that job because he realized, hey, I don't really have any friends outside of soccer, which, like, wow, what a mature step to take. So he just is a different guy. And I think that's why it's so fun to sort of look at him and also talk about his experience, where you say he did have to go through this Mexican-American dichotomy, had great soccer mentors, and his brother who played. His dad played. So he's from the soccer family where, you get some of that stylistic difference. You get some of that sort of like, the importance of soccer and what does this mean and how is this our heritage and those sorts of things. But also with this American flavor that it seems like he wants to add as well. So he's just a unique player, as you mentioned, for how he looks, how he plays. And I think he's going to the 2026 World Cup. I think he's the kind of guy that Mauricio Pochettino, the Argentine manager of the U.S., looks at and he's like, that guy's on my team every time because of how hard he plays, the grit he has, and even like something he's done on the field that I think he does get credit for, but people maybe don't know if they're just starting to watch. He was this sort of luxury playmaker. We talk about these like historic attackers of old where like I think about maybe a basketball player who just doesn't want to play defense. But if you're good enough, if you drop 40 points every night, it doesn't really matter. We'll kind of cover your absence when you get back on the court. Luna was kind of that. But in today's modern soccer, you can't do that at the international level. You really need every player to be trying at every moment. And Luna's added that to his game where he's starting to have that grit, not just when he loses the ball and tries to win it back in a dangerous area, but also to track back to play some defense. So he's a guy who his star is rising. There's no doubt about that.
And I want to stick on Diego Luna just here for a quick second because I have a little bit of history having worked for San Diego Loyal here, which, second division USL. I've seen him score goals against SDFC. I mean, he scored a banger earlier this season, just a ridiculously skillful goal from him at the MLS level. But he's getting the opportunities, whereas he used to play for El Paso Locomotive. And I really was glad that Landon Donovan was on the desk last night for the semifinals because he did bring this up, that, this is a guy who could have slipped between the cracks. This is a guy who's kind of become one of the it players of this entire tournament, just not for the U.S. men's national team, but for the entire tournament. And I wonder like how many opportunities he would have gotten, because, you know, once you get sort of leveled down to the USL, Milan Olaski might be another example of this. There's really good players there that sort of slip between the cracks, John. And you know, I worry that like maybe, you know, the soccer powers here just for whatever reason have a jaundiced eye towards the United Soccer League, but there are good players there, right? And like this is proof of it, what we're seeing in San Diego. And I know that Diego's playing at the MLS level now, but you know, circumstances created this opportunity for us to get to know him a little bit.
No, absolutely. And I think that you see the power of USL where it is potential, you know, Luna's story is a bit different because he's from California, went to the RSL Developmental Academy in Arizona, and then ended up in El Paso. So, I mean, I think the pathways would have been there for him, even though he's such a different looking guy and he had coaches who doubted him or didn't believe in him. I think there was always maybe a chance for him. You know, I saw last night, like Clint Dempsey spoke about people comparing Luna to him, to Clint Dempsey, who for me is the greatest American player of all time. And part of the reason he's the greatest American player is that he combined what he learned in Nacogdoches, this East Texas town, many Latinos playing soccer with their style, with the sort of formal U.S. athletic education where he drove to Dallas, or his parents drove him to Dallas more accurately, 3 hours. And he was in the Dallas Texans prestigious youth club. So he was getting both the sort of like street style that I'm describing Diego Luna has a fair amount of, but also the kind of athletic schooling, soccer IQ, you know, those things that the athletic clubs are trying to drill in. That now I think MLS Next Pro teams are drilling in. But, you know, the fact that Dempsey's from NAC, and yeah, he eventually got found, but he kind of took a long route, like went to college at Furman, went to MLS, and then crossed to Europe, where he became one of the better players in the U.S. pool. Can the U.S. speed that development up? Yes, but you're going to have to find these kids in these quote-unquote far-flung places. And some of them aren't even far-flung, right? Like, think about like Yuma, all right? Like that's a border town, a lot of soccer being played there. Who's scouting Yuma? Is it San Diego? Is it RSL? Maybe both. Maybe some of the Mexican clubs, whatever. But whatever it is, if those kids are talented, we need to find them and we need to get them in these systems. And I think Luna's a good example of that. And I've always said, you know, places like Memphis is like a USL size market. Omaha, Nebraska has a USL League One team. Fort Worth, which I'm sitting in DFW, you probably end up in the FC Dallas system, but like Fort Worth is a bigger city than Boston or Baltimore or Seattle. Where are those kids going? So I think the USL definitely provides these pathways. And part of the reason that when you see this kind of beef between, you know, like the San Diego situation where fans are understandably mad that the loyal who they were supporting are gone overnight and all of a sudden there's an MLS team. If they could play nice, it would be better for everyone because we're still in this stage in U.S. soccer where I've always said, like, it's a rising tide lifts all boats until we get to the place that we need to be. And that's true in soccer media. That's true in development of players. That's true in marketing these first division teams because, you know, San Diego, great crowds, but there's plenty of games when they go on the road and you guys pull up the Apple TV feed or prepare to do your broadcast and you're like, oh, no one was there. And that's the thing is that we're still in this mode of building and building and building. And if you say, oh, USL, we're cutting you guys out or this USL market, Phoenix, we're going to cut you out. It's going to hurt everyone because it's better to have players like Diego Luna on the national team having had that path going through El Paso.
Can I just follow up to a little bit about culture because you reminded me of something that I read at The Athletic last night. And there was a lot of interesting things that were said. But Mauricio Pochettino, who's had an interesting go of it, you know, now finds himself playing for a final. He was asked after the match, you know, just some thoughts, and I'll read it here for everybody. Do you think that was a sport, two teams playing and doing a spectacle? No, you play for something more. You play for emotion. You play to be happy, to be sad. I saw players of Guatemala crying. I said, congratulations, because you're in a good way. That's the way we need to feel. Our fans need to feel the same. It's not come here to enjoy the spectacle. If you lose, nothing happens. Yeah, of course things happen. Things happen that you play for pride. You play for many things. But I think it's good for our players. We talk about culture. That is culture. He's talking about the Guatemalans. That is culture, to see their team, see how it fights, to come here and how the fans behave. That's an important thing that we need to learn here in this country. That is, I think, maybe the most important thing that I've heard Mauricio Pochettino say since he's been the manager, talking afterwards. I haven't heard it all, John, but I just wonder your thoughts on what it is that Poch had to say after that match, specifically when he's pointing to the Guatemalan players who were crying on the pitch and saying that's what the U.S. needs to be.
Yeah, we have to understand that Pochettino comes from Argentina, and it's easy to just romanticize and just say, oh, Argentina. But Pochettino played for Bielsa, one of the most historic soccer managers, a manager who almost every Latin American soccer figure gets romantic about. He's still coaching Uruguay. Bielsa and another person in Rosario, in this cradle of soccer talent that eventually birthed Lionel Messi, discovered Pochettino and took him to Newell's. And from Newell's, he also went to Europe and played again for Bielsa at a club that became kind of another club that he ended up loving, which is Espanyol, which is in Barcelona, but not Barcelona. So you have this kind of plucky underdog mentality combined with the importance of soccer. Then Pochettino goes on to coach PSG, one of the biggest clubs in the world. He had great success at Spurs, where London, soccer is lived differently. And so I think he knew what he was getting into in the US in some ways. But I do think he's been baffled by Christian Pulisic taking this tournament off. And other players maybe not pushing through injuries to get to this tournament. But I think Christian Pulisic is the one where he's looking and he's saying, you're my Messi, essentially, right? I mean, it's not a perfect comparison by any stretch, but you're the most important player for the national team. And he didn't show up. And I just think Pochettino sees that and sees the other things around the U.S. soccer culture and says, if my job is to play some small role in this, what can I do? What do I do? And I think that when you look at that stadium last night, and there are Guatemalans who drove there from Los Angeles to see their team play in a semifinal, 20-some hours, because they want to see their team that badly. And then there are U.S. fans in Austin. Now, listen, I'm not blaming the fans, because in Austin, the game in Saudi Arabia, my brother lives there. I said, hey, man, you going to the game tonight? I'm staying with him to do journalism there. And, hey, you're going to go to the game? I'm going to see it maybe after the game. Grab a bite, grab a drink. He's like, no, man, tickets are $90. And $90? Are they really $90? I'm like, I'm sure you can get them for cheaper. No, you can't. $90. But, I think like there are other things to fix that Pochettino won't be able to fix. But when he sees the Guatemalan fans show up like they did in St. Louis, and he sees the emotion the players have, Luis Fernando Tena, the manager, cried after the quarterfinal win against Canada, and some of the players joined him. I talked to Aaron Herrera, who's this U.S.-born Las Cruces, New Mexico, talking about border towns kind of close to the border, close to El Paso. He becomes eligible, or is eligible for the Guatemalan national team, becomes a Guatemalan international, and he told me, I never get too high or too low after a game. Classic athlete, quote. But he said after that Canada game, I couldn't do anything about it, man. I got emotional. Started to have some tears. And I think like that feeling the shirt people talk about, Pochettino, you can't fake that, right? Pochettino can't explain that into happening, right? Even his decent words last night, I think like you're still trying to make something happen that you can't make happen. I think like even in parenting, I tell my son sometimes, like, I don't know how to make you care about this, right? I can show you why this is important, but you have to be the one that cares. And it's a hard thing where Pochettino in some ways is talking to a nation or a culture. How do you sort of communicate a message to that? But I think if the team, something that Guatemala talks about, something that Mexico talks about, is if the team represents what people feel their nation is. If people feel represented by the team, they will support it. And how do you feel represented? You win. So if the best players are showing up and the U.S. wins games, I think that culture will keep being born and keep growing and keep flourishing. Maybe not in a way that looks like Guatemala or Mexico or England or Argentina or Japan, but in its own unique way. It's just that I do think that like you have to actively foster that. You have to be thinking about that and trying. And ticket prices are part of that, and star building is part of that, and storytelling is part of that, and media around that is part of that. But from Pochettino, kind of all he can do is win games and use his bully pulpit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, like, because it really annoys me when people start saying shit like, oh, if LeBron James had just chosen soccer, we'd be winning the fucking World Cup, and I'm always like, no, no, what it is exactly what Pochettino said. It is creating a culture where there is a little bit more expectation, where all of the things that I just mentioned there, because I mean, John, I'm sure he's happy that they won and that they're advancing to the Gold Cup final. But in a way, I almost read into that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But what Pochettino's saying is like, yeah, I'm happy we won, but I relate to that over there. Like, I understand that more than I understand what it is on this side, even though we're going to the final.
Well, and real quick, John, I think also he was impressed by like Guatemala's whole setup. Look, Guatemala was below 100 in the FIFA rankings. This is not a team that I think Pochettino had probably had that much familiarity with until he starts to look at the tape. And I think he looks at it and he's like, these guys are good. And their fans care. And their manager, who's this Mexican manager who won the gold medal with Mexico, but then kind of was wandering in the wilderness, seemed to be a bit washed, to use like a more modern term. He shows up in Guatemala after they get banned from FIFA because of politics, I guess, or whatever. And they're back, and he shows up, and all of a sudden they're doing things the right way. And Pochettino said he told Tena, the manager, the Mexican manager that I'm referring to, he said, don't change. He said, don't change. Not that he said, look, I'm younger than him. I don't consider myself that young anymore, but he's a man of a different era, Tena. But I told him, don't change because you're doing things the right way. And I just think that's interesting because I think he just has that level of respect for the nation, for the program, and for Flaco Tena.
Hey, wait, I want to tie a couple strings together. Darren sent me a tweet the other night that had a link to an old article that you put together about Juan Rodas, who was volunteering and helping the Guatemalan team to find these like superstar players in America on YouTube, and then finding out if they had Guatemalan heritage and could be a part of that team going forward. It's a great story. Everyone should go read it. I'll link it in the show notes. But I want to tie that as like maybe a basis for why Guatemalans feel represented by this team, to a conversation Darren and I had a few weeks ago, maybe even a couple months ago, where Bruce Arena was basically saying like Mauricio Pochettino is never going to understand what it's like to be an American player, right? Because that's just not the life he leads. And I think he's always probably going to be viewed as a bit of a mercenary who came in here to try and straighten out the American ship. And it's like, I could go extreme with this and be like, Americans aren't going to feel represented. You said, how do you feel represented? By winning. I don't know if that itself is true, or if you need to win from like a bottom up mentality where like you start as like a little guy who's fighting his way up and taking volunteers and advice from everyone and building like what Guatemala has done. But even so, I feel like even if Pochettino wins this game, wins the Gold Cup, I do feel like there's going to be a lot of people. It's like, he's not ours. He's not American. He's the guy we hired to coach our Americans, but he does not represent us. And like, we've kind of forgot that conversation. Like Darren and I were calling this Pochettino thing a disaster before the Gold Cup started. And it's like, we've forgotten that there was a disconnect there that we were talking about. And I don't know that winning makes that disconnect go away. Am I wrong?
I mean, it's a debate you hear in other countries too. Thomas Tuchel, a German man, is leading England. That's the first time there's been a foreign coach, and some corners of the England fandom are excited because he's a wise tactician, and some are mad because he's German. So, I think that like in a lot of ways, I feel like the US is growing up as a soccer country for good and for bad. You're getting some of the results, you're getting players playing in top clubs, you're having the excitement of watching an American and UEFA Champions League, and how is the team going to do in the World Cup? The pressure's on. Pochettino, this well-renowned manager, comes in, as you say, maybe a bit mercenary to the World Cup and then almost certainly gone. But that's also part of soccer, right? That's how it works. That's what other countries are dealing with, and I think the US is sort of wrestling with that, where you have former U.S. national team players chirping about, is this good or is this bad? And they're going to rile it up and they're going to get engagement, and that's how it goes. England has that, France has that, Argentina has that, Mexico has that. Everyone has that, right? These are is the national team manager, should it be, I cover Mexico, and like when Jaime Lozano won the last Gold Cup, he was a Mexican who came in and replaced a series of two Argentines, Tata Martino, who failed at the World Cup in 2022, and then Diego Coca, who didn't even get more than, I think it was 4 games because it was that bad. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is what we needed, a Mexican leading the way. He just needed to win games in a lot of ways, right? I understand what you're saying, like, do you feel culturally, connected? But in some ways, like, it's weird because in international soccer, like, the manager almost has to play an outsized role because they are picking the squad, picking the best players from that nation, and then putting them on the field in a way that they have to win games in. But really, the players should be the stars, right? That's who you should feel represented by. That's who you should identify with. The manager, in theory, puts the pieces in the right place, and then you say, oh yeah, those are the guys I feel represented by. And that's part of the reason that the Pulisic Trump dance and his absence from the Gold Cup both raised so many emotions, because I think, like, as the biggest star of the U.S., that's the player that people want to identify with. And certainly some of the country does. And some of the country, I think, doesn't, rightly or wrongly. But you can also, I think, the kind of the magic of the national team is, like, maybe you feel more represented by Diego Luna. Maybe you feel more represented by Tim Weah. Maybe you feel more represented by Ricardo Pepi. Whoever it is, like, you can pick, and that's your guy. If they're having the success, if they're having, good play, if they're, I think I understand what you're saying, that maybe the win can't paper over some of these differences, but ultimately I do feel like in international soccer, and I agree, it's not the Gold Cup. That's the hard thing too, is like, when we talk about American sports, it's like your sample size is once a year. Hey, did we win the title this year? No. Did we reach expectations? Yes. Okay, It was a good season. Oh, the Padres didn't win the World Series. They built this squad to win the World Series. It's a failure. We're mad. What are you going to do to fix it? In men's and women's soccer, you got a 4 years between evaluation periods. And the evaluation period lasts a month. You might last only 3 games. It's a tough, small sample size, but that's the ecosystem you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, going back to I will say the last, week, 2 weeks or so, I think Pochettino has grown a little bit on me. I don't know that he took this job for the right reasons. The Brentford stuff is weird. I think there's probably more to that. The fact that he's linked to another open job in the Premier League while he's coaching this team during the Gold Cup. But I do think over the last couple of weeks, he's grown a little bit for me. Let's talk a little bit about El Tri. I saw Fox last night. They were laying it on kind of thick, Oh, this A team from Mexico. They should just roll over these B and C squad players from the U.S. men's national team. What's on the line for Javier Aguirre and Mexico on Sunday in the final?
I think that both teams, in a lot of ways, have done enough to kind of check the box and say, hey, this tournament was a success. We got to the final. That was our goal. Mexico doesn't have the absences that the U.S. does. All their best, start naming their best players, they're there. But at the same time, like, a lot of the same problems that have dogged the national team for the last 2, 3, 4 years are still there. They have a lack of creativity. Their creative engine doesn't seem to go down the tracks. Alexis Vega is this, like, fun-to-watch player who had an amazing Liga MX season with Toluca, led them to the title, was the absolute star, made so many different things happen, could score for himself or set up teammates. He's the same guy, but in the Mexico shirt, he just looks different. Santi Jimenez is the same case, where he's a forward who earned a move, already playing at a high level in Feyenoord and in the Netherlands, earns a move to AC Milan, this big historic club, and he's scoring for them more or less. And then for the national team, nope. And so I think that that's just the challenge that Mexico keeps running into, is how do you get this collection of guys to be a team that goes in the same direction, that understands the idea. And I think kind of critically, like, you got this 16-year-old kid from Tijuana who actually from Chiapas, South Mexico, known for being very short. He is short. He is small. He is still growing as he is only 16. He's getting beat up on the field, but when he's not getting beat up, he's making it happen. And that's something that Mexico has lacked. And so I think it's, good. Go to the World Cup as a 17-year-old. Mexico actually has a bit of a history of kind of blooding teenagers at World Cups. Andres Guardado was there as a very young man. Memo Ochoa was there as a young man. Rafa Marquez is there as a young man. So, like, you have this kind of history of, like, oh, yeah, the top players go young and then they become the stars of tomorrow if they're not already today. But also the fact that this team has all its top players and is relying on this 16-year-old who almost seemed like a bit of a chip in, a bit of extra. I put another one in the bag for you because you're a frequent customer. He's the star now. It's like, well, wait a second. Like, that wasn't really supposed to happen. So in some ways, Mora's breakout, while good for Mexico, is also kind of raises a concern or two. But overall, I think the expectation is for them to win the final. If they don't win the final, Aguirre, I think we'll still be able to craft this as a positive Gold Cup. We got, things from new players. We have things to work on in the fall friendlies. But overall, this was good. But I do think, like, for a long time, we built up this Gold Cup as it is the last official tournament before the World Cup. All 3 host nations who want to have their best World Cup ever hosting this tournament in this big moment, marketing-wise. How do they make it match on the field? I do think the team that lifts the trophy, I think there's a big emotional boost. And as you can probably tell from this conversation, like, international soccer, because of the small sample size, because these guys are only showing up now and then, even what you guys are talking about Pochettino, like, the vibes matter, like, big time on the field, because you're not really playing that many games. That idea of, like, oh, it's 162 or it's 82 games, we can just wash this one out of our mouth. Nah, if you lose, you got to sit with that until September. And those games don't really matter. So then you really got to sit with it till next June, right? And so I think that's the thing, is that it really does condition the environment. So whichever team doesn't end up lifting the trophy on Sunday, I think is going to have to emotionally manage wisely and create new opportunities in the fall in these friendly matches that don't really have anything at stake to simulate stakes, to simulate emotion, to get that sort of feeling of losing the Gold Cup final washed out of their mouth. But I think like it's not that whoever loses, it's not a disaster. Whoever loses will be able to say we had a good Gold Cup, we fell just short in the final, unless it's like 5-0 or something, right? But I think for the most part, it's fine. No tragedy, no fire, but the winner obviously will feel much better and have the good vibes.
Speaking of the Mexican team playing players very young and getting them started early, and speaking of the future of the Mexican team as it pertains to the World Cup and maybe even this upcoming game, I was watching Mexico play Honduras last night, and I heard the announcers say they were talking about a player on Honduras, and they called him Choco Lozano, and my ears perked up. I was like, did he say Chucky Lozano? Is Chucky Lozano playing? Because I thought he was too hurt to play, and I checked the lineup, not there. I checked the substitutes, not there, and I was like, okay, I think I was right. That hamstring thing probably knocked out Chucky. Is there any possibility that he comes and shows up for the Mexican team for this game
No.
and plays against the U.S.? No,
He can't
I'll
play in the
answer
game. He can't play in the game.
Okay.
But I
But the
do.
future.
I think his national team future is interesting because he was out of the picture for a minute and then worked his way back with San Diego. Took this knock. Seems to have recovered from it because he looked awesome against FC Dallas the other night. But
Yes, he did.
He's too late to get on the. You can't put him on the squad. I think it would help. I think it would help Mexico. I think, I'm mentioning that lack of creativity, that where do those chance creation moments come from? Even like if you put more into the game, Chucky's a guy who's always taken more fouls than any player on the field generally. And you've seen it with his injury history and even at the start of this year with San Diego. I think he takes some of the attention off of a player like that, which can help. I think he would help the national team. It's not super clear. There are some like rumors of maybe Aguirre is kind of over him or doesn't want him. I think the fact that he was on the provisional roster for the Gold Cup indicates that he's in the picture for Aguirre. I think that this is a team that could use one or two more sort of veteran old heads coming through. Chucky, great 2018 World Cup. The fact that he's been there before, not once but twice, I think helps. I feel like there's a place for him in the national team. The September, October, November friendlies are going to be really important for him and for us to see where Aguirre puts him, where he wants him to play. I mean, not necessarily on the field, but like what role does he give him? How important does he feel like he is? Is he a dead-on starter when he pops in? We'll see. But I think there's a role for him on this national team. If I were Aguirre, I would call him in, and I would probably start him in the first game he was healthy for, because I just think it would be interesting to see what he can do with L3 after such a long layoff, after not being in the national team for so long. In some ways, it's a much different panorama. In other ways, like Raul Jimenez is the 9 again. Well, Chucky knew how to do that for several years. So I think it would be interesting and important to get him back in the setup. But he will not play on Sunday.
Okay, we'll put him in bubble wrap for the national team. Real quick, who you got a pick for the match on Sunday?
I sort of think the U.S. will win it. They're not the better roster. It's not the more talented team, but that doesn't necessarily happen in the Gold Cup. Mexico has pressure. I think there is like more pressure on Mexico's shoulders, where the U.S. can, no matter what happens in this game, we didn't have our best players, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they're playing stretches of good soccer. If they can extend those stretches in the final, if they can extend those stretches toward the World Cup, like I think that they are a good team. I predicted before the tournament that Mexico would beat the U.S. in the final. But I think, the vibes are good for the U.S. right now, and Mexico just looks so stodgy and sterile, and it doesn't seem like they have that spark that has kind of characterized Mexico for so many years. And just the fact that they can't seem to score before like before the first half. They did they scored right before the half against the Dominican Republic. They haven't done it since. I just think it's an issue that they haven't been able to resolve. And against a team with as much depth as the U.S., even this edition of the U.S., I think it's going to hurt them. So Give me the Americans. I'm not like super. It's not. It's more of a lean than a call.
All right, good. All right, we'll take it. All right, independent journalism really matters, and people should support it. And people should support Jon Arnold and everything that he's got going on in his universe. The Substack's great. John, we appreciate it. Thanks so much. The newsletter arrives promptly this morning, so looking forward to it as always. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It was a great conversation, and when you get that project all up and running, we'll do it again.
My pleasure, guys. We'll talk then.
Some loud opportunities is this one. There's Luna now. Big cushion. Diego Luna! USA 2, Guatemala 0. And they have 1 foot in the final. The fans can't believe it. Diego Luna has now scored.
All right, thanks to Jon Arnold for stopping by. Go give him a follow on all the social media channels. Although he did tell us before the interview, he wasn't really sure what was going on with social media anymore these days. And I relate to that. I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying there, John. You feel compelled to use social media to promote all the work that you're doing on these independent platforms, but then you spend a little bit of time there and you're like, why? What is this all about? Or maybe it's not exactly what you thought. So we will certainly be in the habit, I think, John, I speak for us, that we will be in the habit of supporting independent journalists, independent content creators, a lot here on Section 1904. A lot.
Yeah, funny enough, we've had this conversation off the air twice in 2 days because we had it with Sean Kelly as well, who's kind of backed off of Twitter. And he said what I think is a pretty good point about social media, especially like the microblogging sites like Twitter and Blue Sky, where he's like, it's a good place to go if you want to try and catch up on news and get some opinions and stuff like that. He's like, it's terrible for engaging and it frees up so much of your day if you just say like, nah, I don't need this. And that's where I would like to be someday.
You know who Tim Kawakami is?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Tim's. And Tim, I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly who his employer was these days. He was
he was at the Athletic, right, covering San Francisco sports.
He was, and he was one of the original journalists hired by the Athletic. And you might know Tim for his online social media presence, which is very combative. And he did tell me once, and he did say, I think he stated on social media, that he uses Twitter when he's writing and he's got a little bit of writer's block, that he will go on to Twitter and start arguing with people just because it sort of stimulates his brain in a way that he can't do while he's sitting at a laptop. I was like, fair. That might be the best use of Twitter I've ever heard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good for that. Hey, look, as someone who, when I used to run the Chargers site, you know, the early days of Twitter, and I needed an idea of something to write because I had to write like 4 posts a day, I would do the same thing. I'd go to Twitter, I'd be like, oh, someone's got a bad idea or bad opinion. I'd fight with them, and then I'd make a post arguing with their bad opinion. And then someone would be like, where do you find these idiots? Like, I don't know, man, they're out there.
And this has been going on forever, by the way. Do you remember the name Rod Luck? He used to work for KUSI here locally. Yeah, that ain't right. That ain't right.
Wasn't he a drunk who like beat his wife or something like that? He got in trouble.
I think you want to be careful saying that sort of stuff.
No. Like he got like arrested for this. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, I think I'd be careful just throwing labels around. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I would be a little careful on that. I know he had some issues where he did have
Rod Luck arrested in the Bay Area, accused of hitting a woman in a hotel. Okay, sorry, I should say accused of.
Yeah. Let's.
Oh, sorry. Pleaded guilty.
Let's not put the LLC to the test right out of the gate.
He was arrested.
I think he's also moved on. So it doesn't. This isn't the fucking point. So the point is that one day he was looking. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Rod Luck was a phenomenal human being, but one day he did something, and like he started this sort of stuff. Where one day he was looking in the camera and he said something to the effect of, I got a letter here, like an actual letter that was mailed to the newsroom at KUSI.
Yeah.
And he goes, and this person said, blah, 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 whatever sort of inflammatory thing. And like for dramatic effect, he like crumpled up the letter and threw it at the screen. And he's like, and I'm going to do. And he later revealed to colleagues, he's like, yeah, that letter is total bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just a total act.
This is, we talked about this with Jon Arnold, the Trump side of it, but like this is always the thing with Trump, right? Where if he wants to say that something's good, he goes, many people are saying. And if he wants to say something bad, he goes, many people are saying this thing is bad.
Yeah, this is right up there with the hacksaw phone calls from the back of the room. I get it. You got to do what you got to do. You got to prime the pump every once in a while. But I always heard that story, and I was like, yeah, That's what you were doing. You were out there seeking out some sort of social media engagement so you could write a blog post, just the same way Rod Luck was making up letters and going, can you believe that somebody would say this?
Well,
yeah, and like, maybe somebody would have said that, but he took it from the hypothetical to pretend like it was an actual literal thing, whether he was drunk and a womanizer or whatever you're
accused of being and then pled guilty to. Actually, you and me had this experience, and I'm glad that we both kept our mouths shut, but we were talking to our banker like last week, and he was telling us about how he loved those radio shows where it'd be like, oh, this woman gave us her husband's phone number, and we're going to prank him, and we're going to call him, we're going to say that we're blah, 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 and he's going to be like, how do you have all this information? And like, I was so close just being like, yeah, they fake all of those. That's just like, that's a promo guy like in the back making that phone call. And it's all just entertainment. It's basically professional. It's wrestling. It's professional wrestling. Tim Kawakami, by the way, writes for something called the San Francisco Standard, which
good for him.
Honestly looks like an independent media company in San Francisco that covers politics, business, culture, food, drink, sports, and games. So maybe the San Francisco Standard is a bit of a standard for us to follow with Section 1904.
I do not know that I agree with Jon Arnold. He is much more an expert on soccer than I, but I don't know that I agree that the U.S. is going to clip this game. I tend to think, I know Mexico, neither side has been uber impressive. I think it's probably more credit to the U.S. that they are getting it done with this roster, which doesn't include some of its star players, and they're eking out a win here. And they suffered for a long time in that game last night, a long time. They got through on penalty kicks against Costa Rica, but they are advancing, and maybe the pressure's off them. Maybe it's off them because it is. I saw Alexi Lalas, who I'm reluctant to give any credit to. He's not my favorite broadcaster. And some of the other homers on Fox, they were laying it on thick last night. They're like, oh, this plucky group of B and C level players for the U.S. taking on all the stars in Mexico. Oh, they'd be lucky to even be competitive in this game. So, they were laying it on thick there, putting all the pressure on Mexico. I think that's where it is, and if you could win back-to-back trophies from Nations League into Gold Cup, I suppose that's pretty good. So I do not have that level of optimism about the U.S., though. Although I will say I am loving Diego Luna. I am so glad that this is happening. And I mean it. I think I'm not backing away from Pochettino. I still don't think the process was right in hiring him.
Yeah.
But I think he's grown a little bit into this. And I did, that match, if you watched it, you might go, where was this? Was this played in Honduras? And I'm like, no, that was played in St. Louis. And I mean, it was a definite crowd in favor of Honduras, and it'll be all Mexico. I mean, it's going to be mostly a Mexican crowd in Houston on Sunday. So it's what you got to deal with when you're a fan of the U.S.
Yeah,
but I'm not so sure I'm optimistic.
The quote you had from Pochettino was really good and actually got me really fired up because, that's what we all want, right? We as American soccer fans want the whole country to be emotionally tied to this game. Right? Yes. If they lose, it ruins your day. If they win, it makes your week or your month. Like that's what we hope that America can become as a soccer culture. Not there yet, but I think Pochettino has the right idea. Can I say, as someone who has watched more soccer over the last 4 or 5 months than I watched in my entire life, probably before that, I'm starting to be able to see a thing that has been told to me, but I've never noticed, which is the different actual styles from country to country. And watching Mexico last night, I was like, God, they love to dribble. Like every single one of their players loves to show off that you cannot get the ball from me. Like, there was one, I don't remember if it was a 16-year-old kid or not, where he was dribbling the ball while like stiff-arming a defender, and he literally went like sideways, like 20 yards, just stiff-arming this guy and the ball at his feet, and the ball was never out of control. And I'm like, they are incredible at just controlling the ball with their feet, but they don't pass very much at all. And then you watch the American team, and especially Diego Luna, like when he gets the ball, he gets off it really fast unless he has like a route that he knows he wants to take. And it's just cool because he has that same control, but you could see like maybe the American coaching or whatever, which is like, if you don't have it, just keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. And it was cool to be like, to see that thing that's always been described to me. It's like country to country, they have different styles. And now I'm like even more excited for like the World Cup. I want to see things that I can notice from like the German team, which I've told is like a whole different style unto itself. And obviously like our Argentinian team and whatever. Like, it's just cool. The more I watch soccer, the more I understand it while I watch it, and it's fun.
It's a cool light bulb moment because, again, it's I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's 22 dudes kicking a ball around a field,
Yeah.
and it's easy to just think, well, it's like what tactics? What are you talking about? But when you actually see it and you actually start seeing the difference, like you'll see one Saturday night for those that are going to Snapdragon Stadium. Houston's coming in here to do the Kansas City thing, to do the St. Louis thing, to just try to lock it down. So it's going to be up to SDFC to try to figure out a way to break through, score a couple goals. I feel pretty good about that. But yeah, it's a cool thing when you start recognizing it and you start recognizing off-ball runs, things like that. And boy, Diego Luna, he can stripe it. And I'm glad that John brought up, Mora, the young player, Gil Mora, because I was at the game where he scored his first professional goal in Tijuana, and he is box office. He's going to be there for a little while. There's always rumors that he's going to transfer on somewhere, maybe to one of the bigger clubs in Mexico, Club America, something like that. So, I do think, though, after this is over, Cholo season is right around the corner. And like I said, he's somebody who's worth going and crossing the border to go and watch. I've now seen him in a handful of matches. So it's cool that we have this in our area. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one of the great things is about SDFC is, maybe it's just whet people's appetites to watch the Gold Cup when they wouldn't have watched it previously. If not for Luca De La Torre, but just because you got a little bit of the soccer bug. And the same thing goes, for people maybe going out of Tijuana. I think our region as a whole, like can really thrive. And we always know that it's been the perceived sleeping giant. And I think we're starting to realize that a little bit. So, he's a good player to go and watch. I've seen him a time or two. And, there's always some suggestion that he might be on the move here sooner rather than later. Same thing for Diego Luna. Listen, Real Salt Lake is a team that sells. I mean, they sell all their players. They sold like 80% of their goals from last season just so they can make a profit. They sold a player in the middle of the season last year just because they can get $10 million for him, even though they were like third or second or third or something, and well on their way to the postseason. And they kind of gutted their squad last year because they were more interested in profit than they were in succeeding in playoffs. So, they'll probably sell Luna before too long as well. So, just the way it goes. But
hey, has there been an SDFC Tijuana friendly yet?
Not yet. There is one on the books, though, for later this season.
I thought I remembered that.
September, I think.
Snapdragon? Or
Yeah,
Caliente?
they signed a 5-year deal to play
back and forth
against each other. No.
All
of them will be in San Diego.
Oh,
I was kind of hoping they would be in Tijuana myself.
Although you told me that you won't cross the border with me ever again, so I'm happy that they're at Snapdragon. I don't have to test that theory.
I will.
Yeah.
After
I told the story about yelling at the cop on the phone, you were like, "I'm never crossing the border with you ever again."
Yeah. Do you have Sentry though?
No, not yet.
Well, I will cross the border with you that direction.
Fair enough.
All right. My wife is sending me a million texts. She's buying meat.
That's how you prepare for the long weekend, Darren.
We have no idea. The IB Bike Parade is an annual tradition on the 4th of July, so we're looking forward to that. And then fireworks off the pier, where we live, so we get the fireworks. We got a perfect view of the fireworks right off the pier.
We have to go down to Legoland to see fireworks.
Do you dig fireworks?
No, but my daughter does, so I guess I do.
Okay, so I'll be on the Traeger all day. Stay tuned. You never know what's going to show up in your inbox on Friday.
Yeah.
Pretty good week of shows.
Pretty good week of shows. Some really good interviews, some interesting stuff. And you know what? I know a lot of our audience loves the Padres. We love the Padres. We wish the Padres are more interesting and winning and all of that. But this wasn't a good week to talk Padres. And we didn't talk a lot of Padres, which I was thankful we had other things that we could talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to enough sports radio this week to know it's basically all the same stuff.
Yeah.
I literally walked in with John and Jim before the midweek show, and they kind of both looked at me like, we're exhausted by this. Like, we're so exhausted. Like, are they buyers? Are they sellers? I was like, I get it, fellas. I've been here. I know what you got to do. You think you got to feed the beast for 4 hours. We get the luxury of doing other stuff. That's why I'll take a point, like the point from that AC Daily thing that I know he contradicted and others have contradicted. And I will just say, maybe this is the problem. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Maybe this is the problem, that they went from one fucking philosophical approach to a completely different one in the span of about 100 Padre dailies. So I don't know.
Hey man, whatever the players want as the strategy is apparently the strategy. Yeah, I saw whoever was filling in for Ben and Woods on Monday or Tuesday, they tweeted out and they were like, 6 a.m. we're going to talk about like the Padres something. 7 a.m. are the Padres going to trade for someone? 8 a.m. are the Padres sellers? 9 a.m. And it was like every single hour it was just like Padres. And I was like, I love the Padres, but there are times in which I'm like, I need space from this team because they're making me angry, and that's kind of where I'm at these days. So it was nice to have some space.
And the other thing now that I can say, certainly now that I'm not in the space, and again, this isn't a knock, it's just the reality, is, you want to feel, John, like when you're doing these radio shows for 3 and 4 hours a day, you really want to give people a reason to listen, obviously.
Yeah.
So you tend to overstate things like, well, all I know is this road trip. This might be the road trip where fill in the blank. This homestand is going to be the homestand where something's going to happen. And you keep saying that, and then you think back, you go, no, actually, none of it really cares. Nobody matters. None of this matters. Oh, but if they don't get off to a hot start, what? Oh, well, they got off to a hard start. Okay, so what? You know, I mean, there's like 75, 80 games left or whatever. There's plenty of time.
Yeah, I'll never forget the Rays like starting off their season a couple years ago, winning like 17 or 18 straight. I'm not even sure they made the playoffs that year. If they did, they didn't go that much further. Like, it didn't mean anything. They ended up having like a big slump in the middle of the summer that just evened things out for them. They didn't win their division. So yeah, it's a long season. That's why they say it.
Yeah, so I mean, and you keep saying it because it's true.
Yeah,
it's like there's just so much left. There's so many things that are going to happen, and whatever it is that happens over a couple of days. Now, with the deadline approaching, maybe there is a little bit more of a focus on how it's going, given what the general manager said. But for the most part, he probably knows what he's doing anyway. All righty. And it doesn't matter. This sport's going to be out of business in a couple of years anyway.
Maybe we could talk about that next week, about the impending lockout and the commissioner of baseball trying to go around the union and whatever's happening with the TV money. And
it's bad.
There's so much going on, and I feel like in some ways I understand the direction that he's trying to go in other ways I'm just like, what are you doing, man? It seems like you're biting off too much.
Yeah, I got a text the other day from a random friend who has been in baseball forever. I don't know if I can find it quick enough to read it, but he said it's going to make 94 look like what did he say?
A walk in the park.
I hope it's going to make 94 look like a party. Manfred is making it ugly in the meet. I was like, oh, these are guys insider types, and it's like, okay, that's not great. So enjoy it while you can, I suppose, is the moral of the story. Have a great 4th of July, John. Have a great 4th of July, everybody out there. Be safe. Take care of your pets. That's one thing I think we definitely focus on here because we're very, very close to the fireworks. And we've unfortunately seen a cat, our cat, go running through the middle of traffic because the poor thing is just frightened. And not much you can do about some of this. She's not an indoor cat. But take care of your pets. Take care of everybody. Have a safe 4th of July. And thank you, as always, for all of the support here for Section 1904. It's growing. We appreciate it. We feel it. And you are the ones that are making it happen. So we thank you and we wish you well. And we'll talk to you next week.